My dad didn't hug me when I walked through the door. He looked past me, at my car in the driveway, and the first thing he said was, "You drove the Civic? I thought you got a new one." That was Thanksgiving. That was how it started. I'd been driving since 5 in the morning, 7 hours from Columbus to their house in Knoxville, with a thermos of coffee that went cold somewhere around Cincinnati and a podcast I stopped listening to because I couldn't focus. I'd taken the time off work, packed a bag, brought sweet potato casserole in a glass dish wrapped in foil because my mom had texted me 3 days before asking me to. I'd done everything right. My dad stepped back to let me in, and that was the closest thing I got to a welcome. My mom was in the kitchen. She glanced over her shoulder when I came in, said, "The oven's being weird, can you look at it?" and went back to stirring something on the stove. Not hello, not I'm glad you made it. Just the oven. I set my casserole on the counter and looked at the oven. The temperature was fine. I told her that. She said, "Are you sure?" Like I didn't know how to read a number. My younger sister was on the couch with her boyfriend, watching football. She waved at me. He didn't look up. My brother-in-law, my older sister's husband, was at the kitchen table scrolling his phone. My older sister was upstairs, I assumed, because she didn't come down for another 20 minutes. And when she did, she said, "Oh, you're here," the way you'd say it about a package that arrived. I am 31 years old. I have a master's degree in accounting. I have a job I've worked hard at for 6 years. I have my own apartment, my own car, my own life in Columbus that I built by myself, mostly. None of that felt real in that kitchen. In that kitchen, I felt like I was 17 again and waiting to be told what I did wrong. I should give you some context because it matters. 3 years ago, my parents almost lost the house. My dad had gone through a rough patch at work, layoffs, then a period of contract jobs that didn't add up to enough, and they'd fallen behind on the mortgage. They came to me, not to my older sister, who was already married and living in Nashville, and not to my younger sister, who was in college. They came to me, the one in the middle, the one they've always called the responsible one, which I have learned is a compliment that costs you. I gave them $11,000 over 8 months. Not a loan, the way they framed it. A loan, they said. They would pay me back, they said. That was 3 years ago. I have received, in total, $400. After the mortgage situation stabilized, things went back to normal. Normal meaning they called when they needed something and were pleasant when I provided it, and vague when I asked about repayment. My mom started talking about redoing the kitchen. My dad bought a boat. Not a big one, but still a boat. And when I brought up the money once, just once, he said, "We're in a better place now. Let's not rehash the hard times." And I let it go because I didn't want to be the daughter who made Thanksgiving about money. That was my first mistake. There were others. Over the following year, there were smaller asks. My mom needed a new washing machine. $600, her old one died, and they were strapped that month. My younger sister needed first and last month's rent for an apartment. I gave her $800, which she also has not paid back. My dad's truck needed a repair. $350, just until his next paycheck. Add it up. You get a number that makes you feel sick if you look at it directly. I never looked at it directly. That was easier. What I did instead was keep showing up. Every holiday, every family birthday. I brought food and gifts, and I helped clean up, and I asked about everyone's lives. I thought that was what you did. I thought that was what family meant. I want to be honest with you, because I think you deserve that. I also thought that being generous would eventually make them treat me like someone worth keeping. I know how that sounds. I'm telling you anyway because it's true, and because I think a lot of people listening to this know exactly what I'm talking about. So, Thanksgiving. I set the table because no one else was doing it and I didn't want to watch it not get done. I found the good plates in the cabinet where they've always been, and I counted out the silverware and I folded the napkins even though that was probably unnecessary. My mom came in while I was doing it and said, "Don't forget your dad likes his fork on the left," and went back to the kitchen. I know where his fork goes. I've known where his fork goes for 31 years. We sat down to eat around 2. My dad said grace, which he only does on holidays, and he thanked God for the food and for the family being together, And I noticed he didn't look at me when he said it. He was looking at the centerpiece, this little ceramic turkey my mom has had since before I was born. The food was good, I'll give them that. My mom is a good cook, and the table looked nice. And for about 10 minutes, while everyone was passing dishes and complimenting things, it almost felt okay. Then my older sister mentioned that she and her husband were thinking about buying a house in Nashville. It's such a good market right now, she said. We've been looking at this neighborhood in East Nashville. It's up and coming. The comps are strong. Her husband nodded. He talked about interest rates for a while. My dad asked questions. My mom leaned forward with her chin in her hands the way she does when she's interested in something. Nobody asked me anything. I work in accounting. I understand interest rates. I said nothing. Then, somewhere between the stuffing and the pie, my dad set down his fork and said, "So, we've been wanting to talk to you," he said. You. Singular. He was looking at me. I felt it immediately, that cold settling in my stomach. I'd felt it before. It always came before an ask. "We've been looking at refinancing," he said. "The rate we got in 2019 isn't great anymore compared to what we could get now, but to make it really worth it, we'd need to put some cash toward the principal, lower the loan amount." I said, "Okay." "We were thinking about $15,000, he said, "just to get the numbers where they need to be." The table was quiet. My mom was looking at her plate. My older sister was looking at her phone. My younger sister's boyfriend had excused himself to use the bathroom about 30 seconds before this conversation started, which I now think was not a coincidence. I said, "I can't do $15,000. My dad said it would come back to you. When we sell, it's an investment." "The house isn't in my name," I said. "But you'd be family," he said. Like that explained something. I looked at my mom. She looked up and said, "We wouldn't ask if we didn't need it." I thought about the $11,000, the washing machine, the rent, the truck. I thought about the $400 I'd gotten back and the years I'd spent not mentioning it. I thought about how I'd driven 7 hours and brought sweet potato casserole and set the table, and I still felt like a guest who hadn't paid enough to stay. I said, "I'm not able to do that right now." My mom said, "You're not able or you don't want to." And something shifted in me. Something quiet. I looked at her and I said, very evenly, "Both." My dad picked his fork back up. He didn't say anything. My older sister said, "Okay, well, does anyone want pie?" And the conversation moved on. The way conversations in that family always move on. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been asked for $15,000 over Thanksgiving turkey. But it had happened. I sat with it through the pie. Through coffee. Through my dad finding a football game and my sister disappearing back upstairs and my mom starting on the dishes. I helped with the dishes because I always help with the dishes. My mom and I stood at the sink together and she said, "I just don't understand why it's such a big deal. It's not like you don't have it." "I don't have $15,000 I can hand over," I said. "That's most of my emergency fund." "We're your family," she said. "We're not an emergency?" I put a serving spoon in the drying rack. I thought about what I wanted to say. I had about 4 different versions of the same sentence in my head, some of them kind and some of them not kind, and I picked the honest one. "Mom," I said, "I've given you and Dad over $12,000 in the last 3 years. I haven't asked for it back. I've never made you feel bad about it. But I can't keep doing this, and I need you to hear that." She turned off the water. She dried her hands. She looked at me the way she sometimes looks at me. This particular look I can only describe as disappointed but not surprised, like I've confirmed something she already believed about me. She said, "I didn't know you were keeping a tally." And that was it. That was the whole response. Not a thank you for the $12,000, not an acknowledgement that she'd just asked for 15 more. Just, "I didn't know you were keeping a tally." I finished the dishes by myself. She went to sit with my dad. I slept in my childhood bedroom that night, in the twin bed with the blue comforter I've had since middle school, staring at the popcorn ceiling, thinking about all the ways I had bent myself to fit into a version of this family that was never going to love me the way I needed, not because they were incapable of love exactly, but because love in that house was something that happened when you were useful, when you provided, when you didn't ask inconvenient questions or point out that the math didn't add up. I got up early the next morning. I made coffee. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my mom came downstairs and she said, "Are you leaving?" "After breakfast," I said. She made eggs. She didn't make enough for me, so I had toast. I don't know if that was intentional or if she just forgot. That was the thing about my family. I could never fully tell which things were intentional and which were just carelessness. And over the years, I'd learned that the distinction didn't actually matter. The result was the same. My dad came down. He ate his eggs. He asked if I was coming for Christmas. I said, "I'm not sure yet." He said, "Your mother's been talking about doing a nicer Christmas this year. Reservation somewhere, maybe." I knew what that meant. I'd paid for dinner before. A birthday dinner 2 years ago at a steakhouse in Knoxville, where my dad had ordered the ribeye and 2 glasses of scotch and said, "We'll figure out the bill," and then looked at his phone when it came. I said, "I can't commit to that right now." He made a sound that wasn't quite a sigh. Like I was being difficult, like I was the problem. I hugged my mom goodbye in the doorway. She patted my back. My dad said, "Drive safe from the living room without getting up." My younger sister was still asleep. I don't think my older sister even knew I was leaving. I drove home. 7 hours. I stopped at a rest area in Kentucky and sat in my car for 15 minutes, not doing anything, just sitting. The sky was gray and the parking lot was half empty, and a dog in the car next to me pressed its nose to the window and watched me with calm, dark eyes, and I thought, more than anything, I would like to be that dog right now. No context, no history, just a nose on a window and nowhere in particular to be. I cried somewhere on I-75. Not dramatically, just quietly for about 10 minutes, with the radio on low. Then I stopped, and I drove and I got home and I unpacked my bag and I sat down at my desk. I opened a spreadsheet. I know that sounds cold. It wasn't cold, it was the most honest thing I'd done in years. I went through my bank statements. 3 years back. Every transfer, every Venmo, every time I'd said don't worry about it or just pay me when you can. I added it all up. When I saw the number, I had to get up and get a glass of water and stand at my kitchen window for a while. $14,312, not counting the trips, not counting the groceries I'd bought when I visited, not counting the birthday gifts and the Christmas gifts and the time I paid my younger sister's phone bill for 4 months when she said she was between jobs. $14,312 and $400 back. I made a decision. I didn't call and yell. I didn't send a long text at midnight. I didn't go back through every holiday and list every grievance. I'd watched enough of those conversations in my family to know they didn't work. Someone always ended up as the villain, and in my family, the villain was whoever brought up the money first. Instead, I called my mom on a Tuesday afternoon, when I knew she'd be home and my dad would be at his shop. I kept my voice calm. I told her I loved her. I told her I'd been doing some thinking. I said, "I'm not going to be able to help financially anymore. Not loans, not gifts, not picking up bills. I can't do it." There was a long pause. She said, "Why are you saying that?" "Because it's true," I said. "Because I should have said it a long time ago." She said, "Has someone said something to you? Did your sister—" "No one said anything to me," I said. "I figured it out on my own." She said, "You know your father and I have always been there for you." I thought about the 7-hour drive, the eggs that weren't enough, the fork on the left. Thank you very much. The $15,000 at the Thanksgiving table between the stuffing and the pie. I said, "I know you love me, but I need this boundary and I need you to respect it." She said she would think about it. She said we'd talk more at Christmas. She said she needed to go because something was on the stove. There was nothing on the stove. I know what that sounds like, and I know it sounds like I'm being uncharitable, but I've known her for 31 years, and I know that move. "That's the end of conversation move." I said, "Okay, Mom, take care." And I hung up. That was 6 weeks ago. Christmas came and went. I did not go to Knoxville. I spent it with a friend from work, her husband, their kids, a house that smelled like cinnamon and had too many decorations, and where no one asked me for anything except to pass the rolls. I passed the rolls. It was the easiest thing I'd done in months. My dad texted me on Christmas Eve. He said, "Merry Christmas, we missed you at dinner." I said, "Merry Christmas, I hope it was good." He didn't respond after that. My mom called on New Year's Day. I let it go to voicemail. She said she hoped I was doing well. She said the holidays had been quiet. She said she'd been thinking about our conversation and she understood that I needed space. She did not say sorry. She did not mention the $14,000. She did not say the words I had been waiting 31 years to hear, which are, "You are enough, the way you are, without the money." Maybe she'll say them someday. I don't know. I've stopped building my plans around that possibility. What I know is this: I am still in Columbus. I go to work. I pay my own bills, which are mine. And I save money that is mine to save. I have a savings account that is growing slowly, steadily, the way things grow when you stop pouring them out into other people's holes. I talked to a therapist for the first time in January. My first session, she asked me to describe my family, and I started talking, and I talked for the whole 50 minutes, and when the time was up, she said, gently, "You've been carrying a lot." I had been. I am still setting it down. I don't hate my parents. I want to be clear about that. I think they are people who were raised in a certain way, who learned certain things about money and love and what children owe their parents, and those things are wrong, but they're not unusual. I've met a lot of people whose families work like mine. The child who's good with money becomes the family bank. The child who says no becomes the child who is selfish. It's a script. A lot of families have it. I just finally stopped reading my lines. There will probably be a conversation eventually, a real one, at some kitchen table or over the phone where I try to explain what I've explained here, and they try to explain why they see it differently, and we will both be partly right, and it will be hard. I'm not looking forward to it. I'm also not afraid of it, and that's new. That part is actually new. The morning I came back from Thanksgiving, before I opened the spreadsheet, before I added up the numbers, I sat on my couch with my coffee and I thought about what I actually wanted, not what I was supposed to want, not what they needed from me, what I, personally, wanted my life to look like. I wanted to stop dreading holidays. I wanted to be able to save for the trip to Portugal I've been putting off for 4 years. I wanted to call my mom on a Tuesday without bracing for it. I wanted to feel like my bank account was mine, and my time was mine, and my quiet Columbus apartment was mine in some real sense that I hadn't quite felt before. None of that required their permission. That's the thing they didn't tell me about setting limits with people you love. You don't need to win the argument. You don't need them to agree. You don't need them to look you in the eye and say, "Yes, you're right, we were asking too much." You can just stop. You can simply, quietly stop. The morning I made that decision, I took the spreadsheet and I closed it. I didn't delete it. I closed it, and I opened a different one. This one had a column for savings goals and a column for target dates and a column for current progress. Portugal. A new couch. 6 months of expenses in a high-yield account, building toward a year. I looked at that spreadsheet for a long time. Then I made coffee and I sat at the window and I watched the street outside and I let myself feel something I hadn't felt in a while. It felt a lot like being someone whose life actually belonged to her.